to move from waterfall process to
Started recording
agile
now.
process. I
Go
mean,
ahead.
we don't need to just move from waterfall processes to agile processes. We have to see value in everything that we do, right?
Yeah,
Ultimately, we have to be agile, not just doing agile, right? So,
right.
I mean, that's a tough conversation to have. But yeah, that's
That's
where we are.
true. That's true. Welcome, Vinay. Also, where are you joining us from today?
Hey, hi John.
Hi.
I'm joining from Singapore. From
All right,
home.
great. Welcome. Welcome. So we're just doing an open session today, kind of coming back from the summer, air quotes, not really summer for Singapore, but so, kind of an ask me anything, just a discussion on SAFe, any topics, points you're interested in. If you have any particular things you want to discuss, I'm not sure, how much experience you have in it with SAFe. Just kind of drop that in the chat or let us know what you'd like to talk about. And we'll kind of add that to the discussion. We're talking right now about how do we grow ourselves and the industry, kind of how does Scaled Agile grow. Scaled Agile is, I haven't looked at the latest statistics, but is the leading enterprise agility approach there is at this point globally, I believe. So certainly there is more to grow, but there's been a lot of growth. I remember when I first started using Scaled Agile in Singapore, nobody even knew what we were talking about. So it was almost unknown at that time. That was back in like 2014, 2013, 2014. So it has come a long way, right? So I think obviously there's a lot of room to grow still, but we're not so much in the unknown phase where people don't know SAFe or Scaled Agile, although there's a lot of evolution of Scaled Agile. So I think that's certainly part of it. And then you also said I'm an active SPC involved in training and helping one engagement to transform. So gosh, can you tell us a little bit more about your the engagement? You don't have to name the company, but that you're helping to transform. How's that going? Is it pretty successful right now for you? How's it challenges?
I would
Sure.
say they have started seeing the results. To be fair, they have started seeing the results, but they are still some areas where the metrics need to be captured rightly, right? A lot of time you end up just measuring velocity for the team productivity, but without looking at the flow, right? So there are still some gaps that we need to fix in, but yes, we have seen the changes going in the positive direction.
Okay. Okay, very good. So you feel that everything's moving in a positive direction though?
Yeah, seems so.
Okay, very good. Vinay, are there particular topics you want to talk about? Go ahead.
Yeah. One element always curious because every quarter, what we call the big room planning, probably every organization might call it in a different manner, but the objective is same, where we call all the stakeholders to understand how they are. Do they have any blockers? Do they have any concerns of our approach of things? Yeah, the key catchy word is call all stakeholders for this big room planning. So defining all stakeholders has been always a question mark. How do we define all, and who are these all stakeholders? So I don't know. I mean, some of you might share your experience or opinions. I mean, it's quite always, even though it's a quarterly basis planning activity that we undertake. Of course, there are always an elements that some of them don't join, even though they are part of the invitees. Right. But when we look into really big scale of organization, how many such big room planning happens? Let's take an example of an organization of 50,000 people. How many such big room planning happens? I mean, especially some of the senior stakeholders, how many such big room planning they can really attend? Let's say we are in September. I think most of the organizations are undertaking big room planning for next quarter. I mean, is it practically feasible for somebody like a managing director or a director level people where they have cross working functional deliverables to join across 20-30 big room plannings? I mean, so that's where always,
if you have an organization that big, that could be challenging. I usually see organizations that have maybe 2 or 3 release trains running at most to start. So and a lot of the stakeholders are not the same across every release train, right? So in that case, it's not too challenging. It is challenging, of course, like you said, if you have an organization that has 20 release trains, like let's take like Boeing or something like that has, or I think it's Lockheed, one of them has a lot. They're an aircraft manufacturer, right? In those cases, obviously your stakeholders wouldn't be able to attend every single one, right? Because there's so many. It's not practical, like you said. But in most cases, there's maybe one or two or three. There's a big oil and gas kind of out there that in the region, and they had probably two or three running simultaneously, and unlikely all the stakeholders were the same ones. One that I was working with in Malaysia, they're in Malaysia, UK, around the world. We had about 3 release trains running. So in those cases, it's pretty feasible for stakeholders to attend, quarterly with no problem. And when we talk about who the stakeholders are, Dikash, Chris, do you want to take a shot at who are the stakeholders you think are important to be there at PI or big room planning? Any thoughts on that? Who should be there?
I mean, to be fair, that should be anyone and everyone who is involved in your value delivery, right? If that means team, then so be it, right? If that means your security team, then they need to be there, right? So your business owners, if you are on a product delivery or a service delivery, then respective owners of that, right? As well as the entire team, of course, right? And I mean, it's all about creating the alignment, right? We have a bigger picture, where we need to reach, but a temporary mission, maybe next 3 months, next 6 months, what we are going to do, take few steps in that direction. Yeah.
Right.
So anyone and everyone for that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so you're going to have architects, right? You're going to have leaders, whatever it is in your organization, senior vice presidents, leadership, very important business leaders. You're going to have all of the above. You're going to have your executives hopefully coming in, maybe presenting on, the direction, the strategy, et cetera. Really important to have as many of those stakeholders, especially the key ones, as you can, because it gives really credibility. And especially, I mean, having operated for many years in Southeast Asia, I can tell you, when you go and you try to run like something as big as a PI planning, if those senior stakeholders don't show up, people kind of they go, okay, this doesn't really have executive support, and they don't really give it a lot of attention, right? So you really need them to be there. Executives, they just, take the morning and come, right? Or take an hour or two just to be there and show face, as they say. But you need all your key executives, your product management, right? Product owners, everybody should be there in terms of stakeholders. Again, hopefully they're not stakeholders on 20 release trains, because Vinay, as you said, that's going to be really tough. But if they're just doing 1 or 2, hopefully it's doable, right?
Yeah. True. Yeah, I think the key challenge is, one is a release train perspective. I mean, other aspect is even the business teams runs in the big room planning, where they may not even have the elements pertaining to a release schedule. So it's more of an business process that they are executing in a scaled, safe approach.
Right.
So that's where also some elements of how many stakeholders to get involved, and as much possible, how do we get a buy-in for those stakeholders at least to join these planning sessions. Yeah, I think the key point what you mentioned, John, is a valuable input to streamline the number of release trains and align with whole of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you have too many running at once, at least as a new organization, that may not be a success factor. You want to get, at least the first few trains running successfully, and then kind of scale from there, versus having all trains, you kind of, starting 5, 10, 15 all at the same time. Unless you really have a lot of experience, kind of certified SPCs and team members, it's going to be really hard to scale that many so quickly. So I think it's a success factor to, start with a few, start smaller, and then kind of scale it up as the organization gets more comfortable, more sophisticated, more used to using a scaled agile approach. And I think a really big one is also the certifications, honestly. This comes up a lot. A lot of people are like, oh, you're just trying to make people get certified. But one of the biggest success factors that I've seen, if you have an organization, they're like, hey, we have a release train with 100 people, and we only have 5 of them who've been certified, you probably should not expect that to be very successful, right? because what happens is people don't know what an art is. People don't know what a release train engineer is. People don't know what the role of the architect is, right? So everybody's confused, right? Now, on the other hand, if you have 70 of those 100 people who've already been, certified or through scaled agile training, now you're in much better shape where it's actually going to be probably very high likelihood of success. So the certifications, I can't overstate it. I think that's really a big one too, right? Without that, a lot of times, I remember one guy that came in, he was a manager at an organization that I will not name. And he came in and we were doing scaled agile with a client, we were implementing, starting a release train. And he came in and said, oh, he hadn't done any training, hadn't done the certifications. He just said, I went to the website. I get it. I understand what scaled agile is. I know what we need to do. And so I was like, okay, I was a little apprehensive, but I was like, okay, maybe, give you the benefit of the doubt. And this guy's like, yeah, what we need to do is have project managers and we need to have people with accountability. You can tell everybody what they need to do. And we need to make sure that they are very prescriptive. And I was like, wow, this guy doesn't get it at all, right? So it's very dangerous to have a release train where you have very few people who've actually completed certification on scaled agile. That's a big one, right? Hi, Balaji, welcome. Or Balaji, I'm saying that correctly. Okay, hopefully your audio is working, Balaji. We are just doing an open discussion today. An Ask Me Anything discussion about any of the topics that come to your mind with scaled agile, whether it be implementation, whether it be certifications, whether it's, are people adopting it? I have not looked at the latest survey stats to see what the adoption is, but I know that scaled agile is leading in the market as far as enterprise agile, enterprise agility. So Balaji, if you have other questions or comments or thoughts, please add them. Vinay, does that make sense what I was talking about on the training point?
Yeah, I agree with you. Getting, to start off with the certifications and the training, and then refreshing it at a regular intervals is always a value addition. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that is a big one. And you really have to kind of give people how important that is, because a lot of times people just think, oh, you're just selling the training, but it's essential to be successful. So that's a really key one, I think. And again, as we talked about at the beginning, Vikash, with the kind of just the honest conversations with people, I don't tell everybody, they're like, hey, we've got 2 Scrum teams and we really want to scale it. I'm like, I don't know if scaled agile is going to be the right solution for you right now, because you have you're a very small, you only have 15 people. So it's good to have those honest conversations so that it gives, I think, a little more credibility when we start implementing or when we start to help the organization to understand scaled agile better.
Yeah, and I think the training is one of the important step, and I see many organizations fail in transformation because they skip these important steps, like train your team members, train your executives, have a buy-in from your leader why you are going to a big transformation like SAFe or cloud or anything else, right? The training is one big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really key one. Balaji, are you? What's your experience with scaled agile? Are you experienced? Are you new to it? Have you ever implemented before? What is your background and where are you joining us from today? Okay, I'm not sure if Balaji's audio is working, but all right. Other thoughts, other questions, other discussion topics? What have you guys been seeing? Yeah, go ahead.
John, Chris here. Maybe just a bit on this topic. So my experience with scaled agile is about 5 years ago. I worked for a commercial bank in South Africa, and we moved from some IBM waterfall model to Scrum, and then eventually about 5 years ago, scaled agile. And now I find myself in New Zealand, and I've just started with a new organization at one of the Crown entities here, and they're going to move through the same experience where you're moving from this waterfall model to agile and scaled agile. And my question, I guess, is, are there any guidance or learnings maybe from your side on how one actually goes through this transition process with the least pain. And a case in point of one of the things that we really struggled with was actually reporting up to the executive.
Right.
Because for a while there, we were doing hybrid work. You know, you were getting data and doing analytics on waterfall model projects as well as Scrum, and it was just a bit of a mess. And you know, the execs didn't care what we were doing; they just needed data to make decisions. So yeah, how do you go through this without upsetting the executive?
So that's a tricky one, right? I mean, you've got to have the executive support. I mean, I don't know from a cultural perspective of New Zealand if it's as intensely that way as it is in Southeast Asia. But definitely in Southeast Asia, without the executive support, you're getting nowhere, right? You need to have them engaged, and a lot of times you're going to get very little of their time, which I think you already experienced, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times you're going to get very little time from the executives, and they're going to kind of say, okay, well, let's leave that with IT, or let's leave that with the technology, people. We don't really need to get involved, and you can't let them do that because it really gives the perception this is just some technology thing that nobody needs to care about, and that really sends the wrong message, right?
Yep.
We really need everybody to understand. So I mean, those executives showing face, as we often might say, right? That sends the right message. They're engaged, they're supporting it, they're interested in what's going on, even if they only have to slate like an hour or two, for when the PI planning and kind of the end of we're doing the end of the iterations, or end of the PI. Even that shows the kind of support that hey, they're there, they're engaging. But you need that, because without that, it just becomes kind of like an IT exercise, and it's really hard to succeed, as you mostly probably know already, with that just being treated as like an IT exercise, right? You need business owners, you need people across the organization who are also engaging, albeit they may not be as engaged as like the data, a team that's working on data, or a team that's working on architecture, runway, things like that. But you need those executives. You really do. I don't think there's any, how do you engage them? You got to let them know, well, if you're doing this, you're sponsoring this, if maybe they're the sponsor, you're kind of sticking your neck out to be the one to, hey, we're going to try scaled agile. Then, a key success factor is that you are able to show up, and kind of be there for the kickoff, be there for the PI planning, be there at the end of the PI, at least, really communicate to them that, if you want to be successful with this, we need you, to show that visible support, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Have you had a hard time getting executives to join, or have they been joining, or how has that worked for you?
I think similar to what you guys were discussing a little bit earlier, one of the initial challenges that we experienced at the bank specifically was that everyone didn't talk the same language. You still had executives talking about, but where's the Gantt chart, and why is the project manager not here? And and it was a whole culture change, and it took a long time, repeating the same things over and over again and explaining to them that it's a total different approach, and it's a whole culture change on how we are going to approach the delivery of new digital solutions. Before they sort of understood how to talk at their level at, for example, the opening of a PI planning session, and not confuse everyone in the room.
Right. So just them understanding how to communicate with the teams, what was the right level. Okay, yeah, that can be a challenge. So you often want to do that prep with them, beforehand, before they come into the room. Usually we do like a pre-PI planning, and we'll kind of go over, kind of how they're going to talk to the group, what they're going to share. We'll often go over kind of what materials they're going to do, kind of pre-prep that. So all that is really important to make sure that it's at the right level for all the, when the teams come in.
Yeah, and another point is like during the PA planning, so it's the kind of more always the new, if it is a new team, they always think from the traditional point of view, and I think that before the PA, very focused coaching, training, mentoring to the teams will really help actually at least to understand the lean agile mindset, the kind of approach. So when they are coming to the PA, then it will be more focused. They also understand agile, what mindset is, and that will really be successful.
Yeah. Balaji, I didn't get, that's like your audio is working now. Are you, what's your experience level with Scaled Agile? Where are you joining us from?
I have pretty much 3 years in Scaled Agile. I'm certified RTE and currently playing the role of Agile coach for another program.
Okay, great. And how is the program going? You feel pretty well? Challenges? What is your how are you guys doing?
Yeah, usually in the service industry, right, like software service, it is pretty much challenging in terms of a lot of governance model, then complaints from the top management. Once I think that we have some influence to the senior, main thing is on the senior executive and the leadership need to be knowing better on the agile mindset, agile leadership. So I think that actually we do that, educate them properly. That will be a lot of commitment and to the team level.
Okay. Have you been very successful having executives attend your PI planning, executives attend the different sessions and kind of sharing with the teams? Has that been going fairly well for you?
Yeah, now it is changing that now there is a paradigm shift, like the ways of thinking. Earlier they used to tell that, okay, the estimation, we need to have a upfront estimation, we need to use MPP for almost for 6-7 months. So now that has gone. Now it is, so say, like they understand about the agile release train, then value for the program, participatory budgeting. So all this is now coming up.
Okay. So it sounds like you guys are pretty happy with the executive participation. You're pretty happy with the progress overall.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, very good. What industry, Balaji, is it?
It's in the IT, information technology.
Okay, so the company is actually a technology company.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Chris, what industry is the company that you're working with?
Transport.
Transport. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so it may be slightly, I think industry sometimes matters as well. If IT is a big focus, like it is in financial services, like I guess for Balaji, it is a technology company. Sometimes it's easier to get the engagement as well, where if the core business is something else like transport, it may be harder to get the frontline business people to, give their full attention. So that also can be a challenge depending on what industry and what sector, right? If the technology is more of a focus, then it's easier to get the engagement. Sometimes the technology is less the focus, even though it's more focus everywhere now. Certainly post-COVID, that's true. But it's maybe a little more challenging to get kind of the frontline executives and business people to engage as much if they feel that technology is more of a backup house kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Chris, does that kind of address what you're talking about? Or do you have more on that kind of point?
Yeah, no, I think you answered most of my question. I think maybe one of the aspects of it that we didn't maybe discuss is the actual reporting, while the organization is still in a transition period where half of your projects are running safe and the other half are still on waterfall. How to align that reporting so that it actually makes sense to the executives who need to make the decisions on budgeting, etc.
That's a very tricky one, right? Because obviously if executives are used to seeing waterfall kind of reporting, like, here's our date, here's our percent complete, they're probably going to be very challenged when you start showing them, well, here's the number of, features we completed. Here's the here's the, the business value that was completed. And that's not going to make sense. So you're really going to have to, I usually like to make sure that a good number of the executives, or at least the management team, has attended at least a leading safe. So they understand, how we're looking at business value, how we're looking at features, and, how we're looking at delivery, how our overall percentage of performance is over the PI, because it's very hard. And also I like the safe metrics, right? On the Scaled Agile site, we have the safe metrics page. It's good to go into some metrics with your executives that are specifically ones that are specific to Scaled Agile. Let me see if I can pull up that Scaled Agile metrics page. Give me a second here. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. So this is one that I really like to use because, and also if there's a PMO, obviously the PMO can be your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on the organization. Right? But if you have a PMO, it's good for them to understand the metrics and to be working with you on them, right? And communicating that out, because then the executives will start to trust that more. So if you look in here, if you guys can see my screen, should be under measure and grow. Let's see if it's there. Right, we should have a bunch of different metrics that we can use. Go to quality, and we'll have metrics at every level that are usable as well. All right, lean thinking for agile teams, the assessments that we have the radars, all of the different assessments that you can find in the measure and grow. And I think we also have another place where you can find those as well. Those are really useful. And then I would say definitely you want to engage if there is a PMO, if there's a project management office, you want to engage with them so they understand the metrics and they're communicating those to your executives as well. Because if they're used to waterfall reporting, then you're going to have a challenge, right? You're going to have a lot of difficulty if you come and start showing them kind of a Scaled Agile type of metric, and that's not what they're used to looking at. So get them comfortable and adjusted to the metrics, right? Make sure that they know what they're going to be seeing when you start showing them, okay, here's how much business value, has been delivered, here's the number of features that we're getting across the different trains. That's going to be really key that they understand that, because if they don't understand that, then, that's going to lead to a lot of confusion. So I would work with that. Try to make the PMO your best friend, right? If you have one, so that they are actually, communicating using the same measures and metrics, maybe helping the executives to understand it as well. And then I like the assessments, the measure and grow area where you can go and you can also pick metrics and things that you'll use. So these are ones that I like to usually share as we go through, and you can have them at every level, right? From all the different dimensions and competencies, even through the DevOps radar. So these are some that I like to use. Any other thoughts on that in terms of, you got some waterfall, you have some that have moved to Scaled Agile. How do you make sure that people are understanding the progress and, understanding what's happening?
Yeah, this is a very good tool. Actually, we used to do for even as a new team, then they want to move to agile journey. Definitely, to baseline. So, what actually is the team's level, their activities, the agile ways of working. So, this is a very good tool, and we use it for the assessment, agile assessment. So, initially, how we do that is like once we start the transformation, like if we have a transformation journey, we baseline it initially to see that in all the 7 competencies with all the dimensions, and we are not taking as it is. We used to customize based on the program, and then we do a baseline, and then after PA, and in mid of the PA, for example, if it is a three months PA, we do that in the middle of that 2 months, and then see that how the teams are doing. They collaborate very well, communication is there, and then they are doing self-service activities, and then learning how the learning is going on. So all this actually we used to do. It's a very good tool.
Yeah, so I really like this one, and executives like this as well because they feel like they're getting some, metrics that they can share with their bosses, that they can share with their peers as well, and that makes them look good. So obviously they're happy. So I definitely like to use these measure and grow tools. I like to use the assessments. These I think are all really valuable. So I'm not sure who asked about that one, but does that kind of address some of the ways that we can deal with that? And of course, make sure they understand that you're going to have different metrics than you do for the waterfall teams.
Yep. Yeah. Makes sense.
Anybody else use these? Like them, not like them?
Yeah, and another important point is like when we do this using this tool to the teams, like there will be a lot of questions because in that way we can explain. For example, in the team and technical agile team is one of the competency. There is a question called, are the team self-managing?
Right.
So at that point of time, some of them, they do not understand what is self-managing. So you have a ground to actually explain them what is self-managing, and so it is they are getting a lot of commitments, and then they actually really understand that, and then they proceed further.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the self-managing team, that whole idea is something that, especially for newer organizations, I've especially found that in Singapore, it can be challenging, right? They say, what do you mean self-managing?
Yeah.
Why is the manager not, managing the team? So I think that is a concept that can be a little confusing and maybe a little bit putting them off. Sometimes they have to really get used to the idea. It's a self-managing team, this team of teams, the release train. And I think that's something definitely when you're coaching, and I think you said, Balaji, you do some coaching. You definitely need to coach them to understand kind of the idea behind the self-managing team, because it's not natural to teams that have been doing waterfall, right? They're used to being driven by a project manager, not kind of leading themselves.
Correct.
Okay. Other thoughts around that, over the measure and grow, over the having some waterfall teams, having some scaled agile teams, any challenges people have had in that kind of a situation?
I think from a learning journey perspective, because even though the organization will have its a churn of people joining in, moving out and everything. So especially on how the learning journey happens, about their understanding of the agile any of the agile for that matter, keeping aside the safe for a moment aside, that would be one of the key challenges that I have encountered, because many times who were not working in the agile mode of deliveries, getting them on board and aligning those elements is still in progression, I would say. I'm not sure if somebody want to share their experiences and how they have tackled it.
Any thoughts on how you guys have handled the kind of having the traditional and kind of traditional waterfall teams, and then having scaled agile teams? Anyone want to share on that? Any challenges, any successes on that? Any pain points?
I mean, I've worked on a couple of transformation. To be fair, it's a time-consuming journey, right? As I say, if you think that you're gonna achieve and get them, change this mindset in a couple of months, then we probably are underestimating the effort that it requires, right? It takes time to motivate people on that. Whenever they face problem, they try to go back to the older ways of working, right? Maybe that was fine, right? So yes, one thing that we have to is initially when we are setting up, there need to be a coach as well in the team, right? Yes, we know that Scrum Master plays the coach role, right? But I think initially you probably need to have a dedicated coach role for these teams, right? And if you have an kind of certification for the team for the training, understanding basic practices, that is good. Otherwise, internally you definitely have to train them, right? I mean, understand try to train people in a way that they understand the purpose of this transformation, why we are doing something, and if we are moving to a process, then why we are doing that process. Otherwise people just question it out, right? We were doing this, now this is a new process, right? Without, if they don't understand why, what is the value in it for them, for organization, for our engagement, right? They are not going to really be so motivated to do that, right?
Yeah, Vikash, I think that's a really good point. The why part of it is really big, because otherwise people just kind of think, oh, this is just the next process. This is just the next initiative and measurements. The why is really key. I think you brought up a really great point there, right? Otherwise, people, they just think, okay, this is the flavor of the month. I'm not going to waste my time, right? So, yeah. How do you address the why, Vikash? How do you, how do you get people to buy into that?
I mean, that really can't be handled with one-time conversation. Actually, that this has to be multiple time, and to be fair, leaders need to lead the way in this. That's what I feel. Leaders. Sometimes what I say is I've seen people, they move to agile. And their words and actions differ. For example, you want to move them, you want to give the decision making to people, you want them to self manage, but at the end, you still ask them, send me a daily status email end of the day, right? Because you still want to have that control. You as a leader, you yourself are not finding the newer way of working, then how do you
Right.
So
Correct.
it is not
There is a
something that
way.
just in a few conversations, few talks that will be achieved. Actually, you have to leave those values day in and day out, right? And then people gonna see how they are actually getting, right? Previously, they were like we say students, right? They were okay, right A, then B, then C, right? Now they are able to take their decisions, right? So you have to create those technical competence, the decision making framework over to them, right? And see that whether they are also growing in their own roles, right? Because people not only care for the organization, they care for themselves as well, right? So I would say it's a uh, it's a journey, and that will only be with our behavior that will become a culture. Otherwise, it is always difficult just to motivate people with some words, right? Our actions should match. That's what.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's the old Simon Sinek, which start with why. And I mean, the idea is that we want people to be more empowered. We want the organization to be more successful, right? So we're, more successful. We know that the history of kind of technology projects, especially, but in general projects, and the success rate is pretty bad. So we really get a better chance at being successful using scaled agile, using lean agile principles, and that's good for our team. That's good for our organization, right? It means we're not going to hopefully end up being part of some canceled project and all that kind of thing and all the blame game. So I think the why is really important to start with and make sure people understand. Hopefully it's going to be for their benefit. It's going to empower them. They're going to deliver. Going to be able to deliver better. There's going to be better outcomes for them and the organization, which is good for everybody. So that why that's a great. That's a great discussion to have. How do you facilitate that discussion? Do you start? You said I think you started with leaders, or do you also start with teams? How do you do that when you're trying to do it?
You able to hear me well?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. So see, when I have personally, when I did is firstly I need to have leaders supporting that change. I mean, wouldn't just be supporting. I need to have their buy-in into the approach first, right?
Right.
See, what I see is you go to the team on changing this a process or something, but a lot of time if the leaders do not have buy-in, that process goes nowhere, right? So
Right.
I actually start top down. I start by it's kind of a business case. Everything you change, why we are doing this, what is the value in it for this engagement, this organization, right? So people, a kind of a group of leaders, they need to be buying in this point, right? And then probably you go to the a larger, different employee groups or larger set of teams to be able to, talk about that, if we are, moving away from a very process to a different process, why we are moving, right? And what it is in why it is urgency for us to adopt to that, right? What is the benefit we are going to get out of it, what is the benefit these people can get out of it, right? So we have to relate it in that way, and then probably uh, you know still not one time conversation, not all people will be very clear, right? So this has to be, as I say, has to be talked about again and again, if not formally then informally, whenever you get chance, right? And you have to show by your actions as well, and leaders have to show by their actions as well, that this is the new norm of working, this is the new routine of working, right? Not like that we face a tough situation and then we go back to the older way. Then anytime we face stuff, we always go back to the older way, right? So we only see a forward path, not a backward path there.
Right. Okay. Other thoughts on that one? I think definitely when I'm trying to engage people, kind of giving them the why, I will do that. Like when we do kind of our pre-PI planning sessions, when we have kind of our different trainings for the teams, I really want to, engage and help them to understand why we're doing it. It's not just some pointless initiative that's coming out of the top, but it's really something to help us be successful, help empower the teams, help us deliver better. And sometimes I like to point people also, they can see some of the case studies. Scaled Agile has a lot of those case studies, and that often is a good way for people to see. And I think we have the customer stories, what we call them now, customer stories, right? And so people can actually look at and see, a lot of the other places have been very successful with Scaled Agile. And I think that sometimes helps as well, for people to kind of see, okay, this is, there's a good chance, for us to kind of do some positive things here. This might really work and benefit me. And, often some people like to even enhance their career kind of by, engaging more and, doing more in terms of learning about Scaled Agile. So I think that's a very good one. Okay. Anything else on that, or other points you guys wanted to talk about, the why, or other questions generally? Or comments?
Maybe I can just add something here. Working for a crown entity, or I guess any state-owned entity, there is an annual audit from the auditor general or whomever on the organization, and they include a point-in-time review of projects. So ultimately, the leadership will have to provide management comments and actually talk to the auditors on the progress of projects. So I agree with you guys that the exec or the top leadership in the organization, they should be the advocates and really understand the value of following Agile or Scaled Agile.
Absolutely.
So that they can actually sell this and explain to compliance auditors why that we are doing what we're doing and the value that it's actually creating.
Yeah, absolutely. The top leadership discussions, I think those are the most important of all. If you have that support in place, it really goes a long way to helping things keep moving well. If you don't have that support in place, the team can be doing a great job, and yet, you don't really get, as we call it, I guess in the States, they call it air cover, right? You don't get the support. And a lot of times people don't see that good work. So yeah, Chris, I totally agree with that. Getting those top leaders to really, kind of engage in understanding that's a really big kind of our 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the results comes from 20% of the work, and that's probably definitely in the 20% that is going to give you that 80% of the results.
Yep.
Very good stuff. Other comments or thoughts? I think definitely engaging the leaders. That's going back to an initial point that I think, Vikash, you had. Engaging the leaders, having the honest conversations, having the why of why we're doing this, making sure the teams are certified, that they're trained, so they really know, not like that manager that I work with that, thought that what Scaled Agile needed was a bunch of project managers to come in. So we need to have all that stuff in place. Obviously the understanding of the principles as well, and lean flow, and the agile principles that are a part of Scaled Agile. Other thoughts or comments, things people think are important to be successful, to grow organization or kind of personally using Scaled Agile? I think it's also, having experienced people, SPCs, RTEs, people who've been implementing SPCTs, right? Probably have Gerald next month joining us here to talk. Having the experienced folks who've been through maybe at least one or multiple release trains and multiple PIs, that's going to really matter, because you really can't just make it up as you go along, not at the scale that Scaled Agile operates at. All right, other thoughts, comments here during this kind of lunchtime session? Some people might be eating.
Just also one experience or the thoughts that I would like also to hear is, has somebody done across the implementation in the other agile fashion or the other fashion delivery and then moved to scaled agile, and what differences they have experienced?
I have done that. So I have had teams that started with Scrum or like Scrum of Scrums. We had like several Scrum teams. And then we tried to move into a scaled agile implementation. I will tell you that was actually challenging because it was only like, we were only like 3 to 5 teams. And I think that the structure was a lot for them because with Scrum, they weren't very structured, right? And then from moving from a Scrum of Scrums to a full scaled agile implementation kind of midway, that was very challenging for us because they just weren't really ready for the level of kind of structure that we needed to do to run the release train. So kind of going midway, that I found challenging. I think if there's anything reflecting on that, I would say, probably start that release train from the beginning as a scaled agile release train. I don't think kind of switching mid-gear really worked for us. But if there's other people who have thoughts on that.
So was your starting point aligning the release train was the starting point, or something like PA planning was your starting point?
So we tried to get into a PI planning. We'd been running Scrum and Scrums for probably, I don't know how many months, quite a few months, at least a quarter maybe or more. And then we tried to move and shift into, okay, let's go ahead and we're going to get ready for PI planning. Let's find out, are we going to have our Scrum teams, who is our release train engineer, who are our program level roles. But it was really difficult to do that mid stroke. It was like, the teams were not really ready for that. And then we had to try to train people because, Scrum and Scrums, again, very loose, not a lot of structure around that. But when you start moving into scaled agile, we had a lot more that they need to understand, PI planning, how we roll things up at the program or the release train level. And that was something that was a little bit, it was just, I guess, a little bit too much for them while they were already running in Scrum as Scrums. So yeah, we tried to get into a PI planning. It didn't actually end up happening. I think probably because we were in the middle of, kind of executing in a Scrum of Scrums, and that switch was just too much in that case, I think. Of course, that's my personal experience. Maybe others have been successful in doing that, but for me, that was a big challenge. And it was on a smaller scale, like I said, 3 to 5 teams, whatever, maybe 30, 25, 35 people max. So it would have been a very small release train anyway. So I think that was a challenge as well. It was just maybe a little bit too much for that particular switch over. But if we had started out with scaled agile from the beginning, and we planned it that way, I think maybe that would have been more successful going into the first PI.
Okay, that's a great share. Thank you.
All right. Other thoughts, comments, questions?
John, you are going through the SPCT journey, is it?
So I'm an SPC co-trainer. I did not actually do the SPCT. The reason being that I also do a lot on the business side. And for SPCT, there's a lot of requirements required of you in terms of implementations. You're probably aware of that. And I really did not have personally the time for that. I think, if you are going to spend all of your time on the implementation side, I think it's a great thing to do. But if you're going to be spending a lot of time like I do also on the business side, business development, things like that, it's a little challenging to do the SPCT route.
Oh, yeah, I think I was reading through that. There is a whole lot of requirement. You have to be part of a gold partner organizations, and then citation from different engagements where you have added value, right? So that's one thing you go on. No, I'm currently working for a multinational organization as well. Provide support in training. Maybe over the last 1 year, have trained 500 folks into various courses. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, just thinking of what's the better route in safe agile, right? Is it more towards implementation, helping business to transformation, or is it more towards SPCT, right? So still kind of confused in that which route
Right.
I
I
take.
think again, if you're going to be an implementer, you're going to spend like all of your time. Like if you guys have met Gerald Cadden, have you ever met Gerald Cadden? He's one of our
Yeah,
SVPs in the region. They're based in Singapore. So if you're going to be like Gerald and you're going to really be implementing all the time, like I mean, throughout the year, you're always implementing, always working on multiple release trains. Yeah, I think SPCT is definitely the way to go, right? But if you're going to be like me, where I run usually an agile practice, do a lot of business development, I do a lot of other types of engagements, and then I also do a lot with scaled agile. SPC co-trainer has been good for me, but I just didn't have the time to do the full SPCT requirements and renew it every year.
Understood. Oh,
So I think it depends on where you want to do your focus, right?
yeah, got that right. So first we have to choose our goal, our aim, and then only
Yeah.
we go. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's a great path if you want to really be very strong in implementation and you're going to be, very focused in your career on just kind of really implementing a lot of release trains and really being a really expert at that. SPCT is excellent way to go to proceed with that.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Other thoughts or anything else? Questions? Kind of as we at the top of the hour here.
I'm good. Thank you, John. It is an hour nice spent. Thank you.
Very good. All
Yep,
right. Any
been
others?
valuable.
Good as well.
Great. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining. I think we'll probably hopefully have Gerald joining us next month for our SPCT from the region for a session. He always has great sessions, so look forward to that. Look forward to more sessions coming up as well. So thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully we'll have the recording posted up a little bit later here too as well. And you guys have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, John.
All good.
right.
Thanks. You guys too.
All right.
Cheers.